Welcome back to our series. I'm Yoav at the Samsung Next offices in Tel Aviv. Today we're going to continue our journey and talk about creating an initial business plan for your startup. Last time, we gave pro tips about the right way of thinking when you're creating your product and what costs go into it. So up to this point, we've done quite a bit of homework. We thought about our customers, why they would choose our product, and how we can eventually convert their usage into cash. We've also thought quite a bit about the expenses that needed to get our product off the ground. Now we're going to put one on top of the other to create a rough business plan to understand how our business will actually work in the real world. A lot of people out there think, well, what's the point of making a plan if I only have an idea? And yes, many investors are not going to dig into your business plan when you're at the earliest of stages. Even so, there are a number of reasons for building a business plan, but I just want to highlight 4 critical ones. First, creating a business plan is the only way to see the bigger picture. I want to start understanding the timing, like roughly how long it'll take until revenue kicks in, and what my first milestone should be. Next, I want to get a rough estimate of my financing needs. Partially, this comes from my expenses, but now I can also get a rough gauge of how long I will need to sustain myself. This will be critical when I start fundraising. Next, I can see how different components of my business affect the bigger picture. For example, we talked about the difference between variable and fixed costs, and with a simple business model, we can start to understand what is more relevant for future revenue. And finally, unarguably most important, a business plan is a tool for strategy. I can change around parameters for costs or revenue and immediately see how it affects me, which will directly affect decisions like how much money I will need to raise and when I can expect to start making money, or what needs to happen in order for me to make money. Remember, at this stage, it doesn't have to be accurate. Nobody's grading you on precision. But it is important to be realistic and honest with yourself. It's better to set realistic expectations from the beginning than to scramble and put out fires in the future. So I'm going to begin with expenses, based on the initial cost matrix I made in my last lecture. The cost matrix helps me organize the timing of my expenditures. Again, I don't have to be precise, but I want to be realistic. And I want to work on a horizon that's comfortable for me. Not too far out where things are truly speculative, but not too limited where I can't see the dynamics of my business. 18 to 24 months is usually a good starting point, depending on what my product is and what my space is. This gives me enough time to develop the product and enough time to put it in the market and see how the market dynamics play out. So I project about 7 or 8 months to develop my dating app, according to my CTO. My CTO has also found a development team that is willing to create the product for $5,000 a month, plus another $2,000 a month for testing in the 2 months prior to launching the product to market. I'm also allocating $2,000 a month as a salary to myself and the CEO. I do want to hire someone for sales about 2 months prior to launch, and I will have to allocate some money to marketing as well. Finally, at the bottom, I group together all of my general fees into one category for simplicity. I can see that I spend about $11,000 a month initially, which ramps up to $20,000 a month before launch. This is known as my burn rate. So after 9 months, I'm going to launch my product, and I want to start thinking about revenues. So let's recall our initial plan for creating revenue. As a refresher, we want a dating app that is based on real-world interactions in real-world locations, initially in coffee shops. My dating platform is supposed to increase customers for these coffee shops, and I'm going to split the revenue made from these additional coffee shops with the establishment. The important part here is that the coffee shops are my paying customers. I have to close deals with them, but at the same time, I still have to market to the end users. All of this I project to begin 9 months from now after I finish development. Given all this, I'm going to sketch out a rough plan for how this will work from the dynamics of this model. It is based on initial research and some initial assumptions that I have to make. And remember, it's okay that this is based on assumptions and estimates. I can always change things as I progress, and I'm just using these assumptions to paint a general picture of the first critical months of my business. Here are my initial thoughts. The numbers in gray are my inputs. The rest of the numbers are either from my initial research or simple calculations. A coffee shop gets about 100 customers per day from what I researched. And each customer spends on average $4 per order. I want my product to increase the amount of customers per establishment by 5%. And whatever income comes from these new customers, I'm going to split 50-50 with the establishment. This way, the establishment can make a nice, healthy increase in revenue and will have the monetary incentive to push my product out in addition to the efforts of my own marketing. So my business is based about closing more and more locations. I'm going to take these assumptions and project them over the number of locations, starting off with having only one location and slowly building up over the remaining duration of my plan. Voila! I have an estimate of how much money I will bring in for my product. This makes me realize that I need to add some future expenses, commissions to salespeople to close more deals with locations, and I'm going to have to ramp up marketing expenses and probably hire a couple extra salespeople over time. When I overlay revenue with cost, something magical happens. I can see profit, which is just the difference between revenue and cost. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes negative. Again, remember, this does not have to be accurate, but it has to be realistic to your product and your story. Even at this earliest of stages, we can gain some critical insights. I'm going to highlight a few. First, look at the bottom line. This is known as operating profit. What I can see from this is that I reach positive profit on a month-to-month basis in the 24th month. The point where it flips from being negative to positive means that my business can sustain itself month to month at this point. This is also known as the break-even point from operations. As I make adjustments to my model in real time, this break-even point will either move further out or further in along the timeline. Typically, the sooner the better. Next, as we mentioned, locations are my actual customers. And at the top, we can see what is called my growth projection of these customers. This is critical as it drives all my revenue. The more locations I have, the faster I can close them, the more revenue I'll make, and the faster I will be able to reach operational break-even and have a sustainable business. So it's important to track this in real time. Once my product is launched, my sales staff is going to put all their effort into securing these locations, and I'm going to have a gauge based on this initial model on how this plays out in real life. Finally, we can look at the assumptions for both generating revenue and for costs. These may be higher or lower in actuality, and it's important to keep track of them as I progress in real time. Obviously, if my actual costs are lower than what I think they are, I'll be more profitable. And if my assumptions for revenue are higher than my assumptions in actuality, then I'll make more money as well. But it's important to track them because, for example, let's say that I find out that the percent increase in customers is lower than my assumption. Then I can already, at the initial stages, start thinking about maybe promotional projects with the locations to boost that conversion. So let's review what we've covered so far in this section. We make a business plan for a number of important reasons, primarily to see the bigger picture, but also to help with decision making, keep track of key parameters, and understand our financing needs. I'm going to begin by setting a workable time frame for our plan, something that at least covers initial expenses and ideally gives some framework for the first few months in the market. We're going to begin with costs first, right, to understand our burn rate. And then we're going to project our first months of revenue. Finally, I'm going to overlay revenue with costs in the same time frame to see how this plays out from a profit perspective. And lastly, and most importantly, we're going to gain as many insights as possible. That's it for now. Next time, we're going to talk about using this specific plan to define our first milestone and how that milestone will help us think about our first fundraising effort. Thank you.